Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fiction Author Business School podcast. Today's episode is actually a video I created and put into the Legendary Fiction Forge membership. So this month I put in world building training. And the thing about world building training is that, like so many other parts of writing fiction, people tend to use their conscious minds to figure it out, and then they give themselves a brain cramp trying to come up with a cool world to set their story in, but it's very willy-nilly, and it's not always connected as directly to the story and the characters as it should be. I give an example in the video of a movie that had an amazing premise, and I was super excited to watch it, and then they did almost nothing with the world building. And that's what the danger is if you don't know how to connect the world building to the rest of the story, to the theme, to the characters on an emotional level. So anyway, this is just the first video in the world building training that I have inside the membership, and it's called 7 Mistakes That Most People Make While World Building. So I'm just going to let you listen to that for the podcast today, and then I'll come back and just say a word or two when we're finished. Do you yearn to make your living from writing fiction? Do you struggle to finish your manuscript due to block, indecision, or lack of confidence in your story? Have you already published books that just aren't getting the sales you'd like? The truth is, the thing that really makes a difference in book sales is not currently being taught in the fiction author space. And it comes from the story level, not the marketing level. Real talk, if you don't get it right at the story level, no amount of awesome marketing is going to make your book a bestseller. Hi, I'm Liesl. I've got 20 fiction books, 4 genres, the USA Today bestseller accolade, and multiple award wins under my belt. So, obviously I've been around the block a few times. I have a lot of readers that follow me from genre to genre, even though conventional wisdom says that's rare. Why? Because my readers know that I know how to tell a story that's going to make them feel something. And if you can master that skill, you can write anything you want for the rest of your life and know it will be well received by readers, which means better reviews, more gushing, more mega fans, and best of all, more royalties for you. Grab your fuzzy slippers and your chocolate of choice. I'm going to teach you how to emotionally engineer your story into the hearts and minds of your readers on purpose. Let's go. All right, welcome to the module on world building. We are going to start with our 7 mistakes, which I know sounds like a lot, but I will be going through them pretty quickly, just kind of introducing you to them, and then we'll kind of learn what to do instead, how to fix them in the subsequent videos. I will say that when I was going through these, a lot of them kind of feed into each other, so I felt like at various times maybe I should combine a few of them, but I wanted to talk about different things for each one, so I just decided to leave them separate, but you will find that they do kind of overlap some of them. So the 7 mistakes we'll be covering are not being intentional about your world building, thinking you don't need much world building because of your genre, not using the world to drive your story, not entangling the world with your character's inner journey, not having the character choices affect the world, making the world building a background detail rather than a character in the story, and not intentionally planning the nuances of the world. So let's dive into these and talk about what they mean. Number 1, not being intentional about world building. Welcome to me. I'm sure by now you are probably sick of hearing me tell you to be intentional, but this is pivotal. You want to make sure that you are covering all of your world building before you get started. And the reason for this, it really goes back to, of course, being cohesive and really having thought out the world of your story. But more than that, it's a lot about the energy that I often talk about that is projected into your story. If it feels like your world is not very well thought out and it was an afterthought, your reader is going to pick up on that. Okay, so at the best, they're just not going to connect with the story very well. And at the worst, they're going to complain about it loudly in the reviews. And obviously, we don't want that, right? So just like everything else, you need to do a little bit of planning. So how are you going to fix this? I want you to consider each aspect of world building, and we're going to get into the details of this in the later videos. You're going to journal on it. Again, big surprise, right? You're going to decide if it will serve your story. So I'm actually going to give you a lot of different aspects of world building here, and I am not by any means saying that you have to use them all in every story. Not at all. Not at all. If there really is something that is completely irrelevant to the story you're telling, then by all means, don't use that. But what I don't want you to do is to assume you don't need it and not even consider it. So being intentional is about considering every part, thinking about it, brainstorming about it, incorporating which parts will serve your story. And that can even add layers and nuances to your story and make it a deeper, richer story than you would have had otherwise. Okay, so that's good on a lot of levels. But the other part of being intentional is deciding very intentionally what to leave out because it doesn't serve your story. So it would be just as bad to try to force world building into your story that doesn't belong there as it is to not do world building at all. So you just need to be intelligent, give it some forethought, and use a lot of sense and intention in considering it beforehand. Okay. Mistake number 2, thinking you don't need much world building because of your genre. This is a big one, guys, and I don't want you to fall into this trap. So there are certain genres, mostly sci-fi and fantasy, that are known for having a lot of world building, and understandably so, right? But what happens is somebody is writing a story in a different genre and they think, well, I'm not writing that, so I don't need that much world building. Okay. So you may be thinking, well, yeah, but I don't write the big door stopper high fantasies like Game of Thrones where you need to create entire empires and histories and so I don't need that. Okay. Now it's true that you're going to need maybe less and definitely different world building if you're not in that genre. So let's say the example I like to use is, what if you're writing a contemporary romance and it's set mostly in like a workplace environment. So maybe the heroine is in love with her boss or something, and it's set mostly in an accounting firm. Okay, I try to come up with some place that sounds kind of boring, right? Now, what most people think, most authors, I mean, is that, well, she's living in a contemporary world. There's no magic. There's nothing that's very different from our world, so I don't need world building. That's incorrect. It's definitely true that you don't need to explain as much of the world because it's not different than the world we live in. So there's some truth in that supposition. But the problem is not everybody lives and works in an accounting firm. So there's still parts of the world that your reader is not going to understand unless you explain them to them. So all I'm saying is that I don't want you to write off any aspect of the world building right off the bat because you think you don't need it. Even if you don't think that it applies to your genre, I'm going to challenge you to brainstorm how it could apply to your genre. And you have to understand too that sometimes we have to use very high level overarching terms for world building, but that doesn't mean that they don't apply to your story. They might just apply in a smaller way. So using the same example, what are you might not have to worry about your heroine going against global industry norms or bucking cultural beliefs because we're talking about a much smaller scale story that takes place within a workplace. Okay, but what are these societal norms for that accounting firm? I mean, does like nobody talk to the boss that way? That would qualify as her bucking a society norm because that's not something that's generally done. So all I'm saying is take what we are throwing down as world building, but apply it to your story, right? That's how you're going to fix this. Apply every part of the world building to your story, no matter what the scale is. It can be big, it can be small, it can be individual, community, or global. You can even go bigger if we're talking space opera, make it galactic. It doesn't matter, but how would it apply to your story? So don't think that because I'm talking about government and your story isn't one that has to do with governments. Okay, well, what is the government of the setting where your story takes place, even in a single household? If mom's in charge, then guess what? Mom's the government. What does that look like to the people in the household? Apply every part of it to your story and then make an intelligent and informed decision about whether you're going to make it part of your story or not. And you're probably going to be surprised that pretty much every one of these will have some place in your story because people can't exist in a setting without most of these things. It's just giving you a different way to look at it and to be intentional in a way that you never have been before and didn't realize that you could be. Okay, that's the idea. Mistake number 3, not using the world to drive your story. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. And apologies in advance if anybody has seen this film and loved it. It's an older movie now, probably 15 years old. It's kind of a B movie, and it has a fantastic premise. Okay, I was excited to watch this movie. So the world that it is set in it's very dystopian, and it's one where nobody on Earth Nobody on the planet can get pregnant. It's been a long time since I saw it, so I'm probably forgetting a lot of the details, but I think they talk about part of like, decisions humans have made, ecocide, environmental factors, things like that. Whatever it was that happened, um, no one is fertile enough to conceive anymore. And it's been about 2 decades as the film starts. So, I mean, the youngest people on the planet are like in their 20s. They're not exactly elderly yet, but even so, if we do not solve this fertility problem, we're looking at the demise of the human race in only a few decades, right? That is a really interesting world, really interesting. And the premise of the story is that against the backdrop of this world, Clive Owen is in it. He plays the main character. He's just doing something that is pretty normal for him. I think he's transporting someone, and then something goes wrong. Someone attacks them, and he realizes that he's kind of stepped into the middle of this situation that he unwittingly, he didn't know about. And the woman he is transporting, she's just wearing like a really heavy overcoat, and he just, it just kind of makes her look like she's a little bit heavy set, but what she's actually hiding is that she's pregnant. So we're talking about the only known pregnant woman on the planet. And he has run into her, and the reason people are attacking her is because when you are the only one on the planet who can get pregnant, people want to use you as a political tool and as a pawn. That is a fascinating premise. I mean, I could go so many places with that premise. And the reason I'm using this as an example is because they just didn't go anywhere with it. Um, I mean, it was an okay movie. Like I said, kind of a B movie. It was interesting while I was watching it, but I wanted them to go someplace more emotional with it, and I wanted to really, really dig into that a lot. And I just felt like it was very surface, and they just didn't do very much with it. Okay, you need to use the circumstances of your world to drive your story. And while this kind of did that, that was what I just explained was like the extent to which they used the world to drive the story. It pretty much, they didn't really use it to drive what was happening in the story. They used it to set up the premise, and then it's like they kind of forgot about it. You know what I mean? So the premise was super interesting, but the execution just fell really, really flat. And that's what you don't want. So what I'm going to say here is actually, I'm going to keep talking about it because these are like the other mistakes that people make as we go along, but you need to make sure and entangle the world with your character's inner arc. That's a big one. Make the world affect your character and the character affect your world, and make the world a driving force or additional character in the story. So let's get into those a little bit more. The fourth mistake is not entangling the world with your character's inner journey. And this is probably going to be the big one that I'm going to have you do, that you're going to learn to do in the next couple of videos that you've probably never done before. Okay, people don't understand that having a cool world, sure, it's a cool detail, but if it's not driving your character's journey, it's pretty useless as a cool detail in the world. It needs to be there for a reason. It needs to be functional in the story that you're telling. And the story is about a journey for the character that leads to change, right? So the world needs to be the word that comes to mind is complicit in that change. It needs to be a big part of it. And people don't do that. So how we're going to do this is we're going to ask how the conditions of the world would either reinforce or disprove the character's limiting belief. And we're going to come up with instances of how that might look in the story and incorporate the world into the story and how it's being pushed forward, especially as concerns the character's inner arc. So we are going to learn how to do that in the next video. It's the internal stuff that we need to work on. 5 is not having the character choices affect the world. Now, the thing about this is that we need to make sure that if the world is another character in the story, then it needs to act and react much like another character would. So for every aspect of the world building, you need to ask how your character's choices in the story might change the world. Now, they might not. I'm not saying that every choice the character makes has to change the world. The answer to that might be this choice doesn't change the world at all. Okay, that's fine. But would it change the world? We need to understand how the world is reacting to the character and how the character is reacting to the world. This is true of plot too. For every step of an arc or plot, ask how what's happening might or might not change the world and how the world at large might react to the character choices. Your world should push your reader toward the climactic moment as much as anything else does, and it should act and react much like another character would, which I already said. So let's think of an example. If you have a character that is railing against the societal norm, there's got to be a pushback to that. So, a really obvious example would be like, let's say it's like an anti-slavery story, okay? If somebody is trying to abolish slavery or just free a single slave, there's got to be a pushback to that. And it doesn't mean like the world, like the earth itself is pushing back, but how is society pushing back? Is there somebody coming to stop them? Is that going to change the way other people see things? It's very common, especially in revolutionary stories, that even if the person who is fomenting the revolution doesn't succeed, that changes the way that people see the government and see the conditions they're under. And that is the world changing because of the character choices. So again, that might not apply in your story. And if not, that's fine, but it's something you need to consider. Are the character choices changing the world? Is the world changing the character? How is the character reacting to the world? How is the world reacting to the character? These are questions nobody tends to ask when they're creating their story, and they can create such depth and nuance and more layers of your story. So this is another mistake people make. Number 6, making the world building a background detail rather than a character in the story. I've kind of covered this already, right? The setting should always be an additional character in the story. So think of it like a scene with 4 characters in it. If you have 4 characters in a story, you can only have 1 character talking at a time. So you need to keep track of them all, okay? The more people you have in a scene, the trickier it is. But if you're going to write that kind of scene, you always need to be asking, what is everyone else doing, right? What is character 1 doing while character 2 is talking? What is character 3 doing? Where is character 4? And you don't have to necessarily, write every single detail of that at every single moment, but you just don't want the reader to lose track of where the characters are. You don't want one of the characters to speak up and the reader to go, oh, I forgot they were in the room. Are they in the room? Okay, so that's a skill. I'm sure some of you have written scenes like that before, but your world is exactly the same way. It's like another character. So always be asking what is going on right now with your world and your world building elements. And, it kind of goes back to the mistake number 5 that I talked about. What is the world doing in reaction to what the characters are doing? Are they doing anything? Because it really could be, I'm thinking of Lord of the Rings, Sauron and
thanks for listening today. If this episode helped or inspired you in any way, would you do me a solid and leave me a review? Reviews help other fiction authors find the podcast. You could also recommend it to a writer friend of yours so they can get the same inspiration you got. Remember, you have a story inside you that only you can tell. So get out there and write your soul story, because your readers are waiting for it with bated breath.
Reacting to this over here. As long as you can answer those questions, you're golden. But if you don't know, a reader at some point is going to ask that, and it's going to come across as a hole in your story. So just be aware of that. And number 7, not intentionally planning the nuances of their world. This is a lot like mistake number 1. I talked about nuance, or I talked about intentionality in mistake number 1, but here we're specifically talking about the nuance. When I say the nuances, I mean the way that the world shows up physically in your story. So all the different aspects of your story, which I'm going to give you a list and journal prompts for, but I just want you to go through each and every journal prompt, journal on the questions given. You'll get those in a subsequent video. And then, as I said before, thoughtfully decide what to include. So these are the mistakes that most people make, just so that you are aware of them. So now we're going to jump into the internal part so that you can understand what you need to plan, why, and how to go about that. Okay, see you there.